Years ago, when Ray Brassier, the guy connected to the object-oriented philosophy to Harman and Quentin Marisu and those guys, came out with his first book, which may have been his only book. He hasn't written very much over the years. This was some years ago. Um, it was notable how large the bibliography was. He had read a huge number of books, but what he wrote was largely blanched, and there wasn't anything particularly interesting in the short book he wrote. Um, there is, and has been for some decades now, um, a contest between the style of reading as numerous and therefore, in a way, as quickly as possible in the, let's say, the graduate student years, but perhaps extending on beyond that, or doing what Strauss said was still possible, but it's narrowing in its possibility in recent years because one is so pressured to keep up with the latest, to read little and slowly. So in going over the Grunbegriffe, Heidegger's text that we're going over, paragraph by paragraph, sometimes going over the same paragraph again and again, we're following the method of what Strauss said. I paraphrase. Strauss used to say to his students something along the lines of, we're in no great hurry, and if we can learn more by taking our steps, then we will do that. So, therefore, this is an answer to those who say we've already heard this, we've already heard these paragraphs of the Grunbegriffe, you're going over it too much. But if we want an approach, a real approach to Heidegger and to assess Heidegger, we have to poke around and even take out a lancet and cut out sentences and look at them. And I'll only mention one other thing in this respect right here is that I've always heard, and it's been a rumor, and it's never been confirmed to me, that there was a Heidegger seminar on Plato, on Plato's Commonwealth or Republic, where Heidegger spent an inordinate amount of time, maybe almost the whole seminar, on the first sentence, which is something like, we went down to the Piraeus, down to the dock. You have to pass a long corridor, maybe more than a kilometer from Athens to Piraeus. The beginning action takes place there. It's a walled corridor. Many things, you can see how many things could be said about that, going down to the Piraeus, leaving the city. Only 2 or possibly 3, if you count the Republic, dialogues take part out of the city. What does that mean? You can see how that can ramify, and many things can be said about it. Just that one line, why Plato chose to do that. Plato was very deliberative about what he said, his settings, the names of his characters, etc., etc., etc. He had a long time to think about it, and he was the first one to do it, and it really seems like a serious work to him. It wasn't just adding complexity to be intricate or for cleverness. So in the same way, when we read Heidegger, we can think that Heidegger was paying an inordinate amount of attention to what he was saying, and a lot is packed in there. So if we want to understand Heidegger more well, there's some justification for the procedure of going over things very slowly and taking our steps, as Strauss used to say. tempted to go over the first paragraph again, but let's just go over a little bit that comes in after that. Starting in the second paragraph, and still Grunbegriffe, which could mean ground reasons, ground concepts. It's translated basic concepts, Grund, ground. We have grounds for thinking something, reasons for thinking something, the use of our reason through a concept such as nature to then approach being, the use of our reason through the idea of nature to approach being, the idea being said in the Platonic way, being more direct than the concept as it's come down to us as more in connection to how Nietzsche has called Socrates the first theoretical man. He started isolating the ideas, which originally meant the look of things. You just look at something, you say this is a natural object. Instead, he brought them into speech. Heidegger is saying to be human is to be a sayer, to speak. To be human is to be a thinker also. Rational animal, but what is rational here? That goes along with being a sayer, because Heidegger is saying it's actually the saying, speaking, which is thinking. In the Was heißt denken, he says that also in the other thing I just said, to be human is to be a sayer, is from the introduction to metaphysics. Okay, so this second paragraph, since, however, the lecture is listed under the rubric philosophy, naturally in scare quotes, the basic concepts, quote unquote, of philosophy are meant. So we could see just off the face of it, calling this into doubt with regard to philosophy. Heidegger regards philosophy as a synonym for what we usually call science these days, and also as a synonym for quote unquote the theory of the object. I think basically you could sum that up by saying these kind of things that who's a Scottish guy that does the hard problem of is he Scottish? I think so. The hard Chalmers, the hard problem of consciousness. You have consciousness and then its object. The whole of metaphysics, philosophy, science is brought in. So are these just concepts of philosophy, or are they perhaps remember that concept is Begriffe or Begriffe, Griffin, Griffen, meaning to grip, grippings. So how are we gripping things? Are we gripping the object? Or I think Heidegger is trying to lead us to the idea that what we're gripping is possibly being, but also, since there's this other term in there, the Grund, which can be understood as reason. Do you have grounds for thinking something? Do you have reasons for thinking of something? This gripping is taking part with two terms. There's the reason, which is the essence of the human being by the old way of thinking, but that would be the essence of, not of Dasein, but the essence of the human being understood as a living animal, kind of animal, a suke in an animal, a soul in an animal. So we're looking at this relationship between the concepts and the grounds, and how that stands next to Dasein as this questioning of being. Instead, the title only says, quote unquote, Grunbegriffe, not the basic Begriffe or Begriffen, not the basic ideas, concepts, looks of things, genuses, species, kinds of things. Remember, Nietzsche speaks of being his own kind. Ipsismosity, his ownmost kind. This idea has been in the wake of the theory of evolution striking the Prussian world. Strauss still speaks of Darwin as sort of a terrible person, because he's so brought such turbulence into the concepts or the way our way of gripping things. Because if a redwood or if a hippopotamus is a permanent uh, idea, which is always there, you can grip things in a way where you can then abstract and say things that are always true. But if things are evolving, if our concepts only are rules that capture things that are changing and they never get them correctly, then you have this turbulence where you can't understand things correctly, or only in a way that's sort of a rule of thumb, but not truth or science or something that can always be communicated to thinking beings, even in 40,000 years, even in evolutionary time, even in millions of years, when the hippopotamus has gone back into the ocean and become a porpoise-like creature again, or whatever it was they used to be. According to the tradition and also the traditional and also correct view, philosophy indeed thinks something more general than the particular regions of nature, history, state, art, nation, living thing. If we do not intend to mean the basic concepts of philosophy, then the unsupplemented title must have something even more general in mind than what is thought in quote unquote philosophy. This most general of all supposedly does not allow itself to be said directly. So again, we have this issue of the greatest genus. In the Introduction to Philosophy book, Heidegger questions whether being. So we've talked about this before, that Kant concludes that being can't be the highest genus. So Heidegger gives a specific tangible example of this, where you say, if you have the genus tree and then you say redwood tree, you have an example of the genus tree. But Heidegger questions whether it is, we could at all consider a particular being as an example of being. Therefore, so you have, if you were to say the genus being as the supreme ultimate genus, as though this is what philosophy were always saying, that it was something more than just these specific regions, but it was kind of an ultimate, it studied the ultimate genus. Then could you then pick out any particular being and say, this is an example of being rather than a being? It is, a tree is a being, but it's a being that has been distinguished or determined over and against other beings, over against cars, over against streets, over against asphalt, over against human beings, over against the sky, over and against justice, over against philosophy. In being distinguished, it's one being among the millions of beings, and also dreams and memories and so forth. And that which, whatever we can speak of and therefore think, that which Socrates speaks of as coming before birth in the Suke. Is this at all an example of being? Heidegger poses this question. So you see, in the beginning of the Grunbegriffe, we're already in the middle of a swelter of all Heidegger's reflections, and we want to see if we can enter them as much as possible and understand them well.